The mop dragged slowly across the scuffed hallway tiles, its wet swirls tracing silent circles as the morning bell rang. Students rushed past him like he didn't exist. Backpacks slammed into his side. Not a glance, not a word, just footsteps, laughter, and the sharp shriek of sneakers on linoleum. He was invisible. Again, out of the way. Jerome, snapped Miss S. Thistle, the AP calculus teacher, not even pausing as she shoved past the janitor with her coffee. A drop splattered on the clean floor. He'd just finished. You missed a spot. Jerome Carter stood still, gripping the mop a little tighter. He didn't say a word. He never did. At 53, with streaks of silver threading his close-cropped hair and shoulders that still carried the strength of a younger man. Jerome was used to this. He just dipped the mop back in the bucket and moved to clean the mess again. In the staff room, whispers often flew like arrows. "Poor guy," murmured Coach Williams once. "Always scrubbing floors but never talks to anyone. He probably didn't graduate high school," added a counselor. Not even hiding her tone. "It's always the same story. They didn't know. No one asked." That Friday, Principal Halbrook stormed through the halls like a hurricane, tie flapping behind him. "Where the hell is the janitor?" he bellowed. A water pipe had burst in the science wing. Students were slipping. Teachers were panicking. Jerome arrived within minutes, toolbox in hand, eyes focused. He didn't say much, but within 10 minutes the leak was sealed, the floor dry, the crisis over. "You took your sweet time," Halbrook muttered, not meeting his eyes. "Try not to be so slow next time." Jerome only nodded. Later that day, while fixing a loose ceiling tile in the library, Jerome overheard a group of students. "Why is that guy always around?" sneered Blake, a senior with a smug grin. "Bet he lives in the boiler room." "Maybe he does," laughed another. "Bet he can't even spell principal." The words stung more than they should have. Jerome had once stood behind a podium at Harvard, lecturing about leadership and education, but none of that mattered here. Not anymore. That night, Jerome sat alone in the small janitor's office in the basement. The walls were lined with keys, maintenance charts, and fading newspaper clippings. One was framed yellowed at the edges. "Youngest black principal in Massachusetts, Jerome Carter, 32. Reshapes failing school." Below it, a photo of him smiling in a suit, shaking hands with the governor. He stared at it a long time. Then he picked up the letter he had never sent. His application for the open principal position at Lincoln High School. He'd filled it out 3 times, ripped it up 3 times, but this time he placed it gently in an envelope. The following Monday, the district superintendent visited Lincoln High. Superintendent Brenda Morales, a sharp, observant woman in her 50s, walked the halls with Halbrook, who bragged about test scores and recent budget cuts. "We're efficient, ruthless even," he joked. As they passed the custodial closet, Morales paused. Jerome had just stepped out, toolbox in hand, nodding respectfully. "Is that your janitor?" she asked. "Yeah, quiet guy. Been here for years. Stays out of trouble." Morales narrowed her eyes. "He looks familiar." "Doubt it. He's nobody." 3 weeks later, everything changed. Principal Halbrook was abruptly removed after an internal audit exposed years of financial misconduct and abusive disciplinary practices. The announcement shocked the staff. Rumors flew. Who would take over? The position had been posted quietly. Then one Friday, the intercom buzzed. "Staff, please report to the auditorium for an urgent announcement." Teachers gathered, buzzing with speculation. The students were dismissed early. On stage stood Superintendent Morales, flanked by the school board. "Lincoln High has been through much," she began, "but today marks a new chapter, one of vision, experience, and integrity." She smiled. "Please welcome your new interim principal, Mr. Jerome Carter." Silence, then gasps. Jerome walked onto the stage, no mop in hand. Instead, he wore a sleek navy suit, crisp white shirt, and a calm smile that radiated confidence. He approached the mic. "Some of you know me as the janitor, and that's okay. For years, I cleaned these halls, fixed your sinks, and kept the lights on because I care about this school. But long before that, I was an educator, a principal, an advocate for students. Dead silence. I took a job as a janitor because life hit hard. My wife got sick. I needed stability, but I never stopped watching, never stopped learning. And now, I'm here not just to lead, but to lift this school higher than it's ever been. A single clap echoed, then another. Soon, the room erupted in applause. In the weeks that followed, things began to shift. Teachers who once ignored Jerome now leaned on his experience. "Mr. Carter," stammered Miss S. Thistle one morning, "could I get your insight on a new grading rubric?" "Of course," he said, with a gracious nod. In meetings, he was firm, fair, and brilliant. Students who used to sneer now stared in awe. Even Blake, the smug senior, approached him quietly. "I didn't know, sir. I'm sorry for what I said." Jerome looked at him kindly. "You don't have to apologize. You just have to grow." He initiated mentorship programs for struggling boys, launched a scholarship fund named after his late wife, and he didn't stop fixing things on weekends. He was still in the halls, tightening bolts, repainting lockers, patching holes. But now, when people saw him, they said, "There's Principal Carter, not janitor, principal." In April, the school held an assembly to honor him. Brenda Morales returned, beaming. "This man," she said, "reminds us that leadership has nothing to do with where you stand, but how you serve." And as Jerome stood at that podium once more, the same way he did years ago, he saw something different in the crowd, eyes full of respect, not dismissal. He took a breath. "I'm not here because I'm better than anyone. I'm here because I never gave up, and I'll never give up on any of you." The students stood, the teachers stood, the applause roared. In that moment, Jerome Carter, the janitor, the ghost in the hallways, was finally seen, and he never disappeared again. The next day, the school buzzed with something it hadn't felt in years: hope. Students whispered in the halls, not about fights or detentions, but about what Principal Carter might do next. "You think he'll change the uniform policy?" "Nah, but I heard he's bringing back music class." My brother said he helped redesign the whole curriculum back at his old school. Dudes for real. Inside the main office, Jerome sat at the principal's desk, once a symbol of silent scorn, now his command post. He didn't sit behind it like a king, though. He stood. He walked. He opened the door himself for every visitor. He knew every student's name by week 3. "Come in, Eliza," he said, waving in a sophomore with tears in her eyes. "I heard you got into some trouble in gym class." "It wasn't my fault," she sniffled. "They kept calling me names." He didn't ask what names. He knew. "Do you want to talk about it?" She nodded. "All right, but first, let's breathe together. In through the nose, out through the mouth." They sat, they breathed, they talked. When she left, her shoulders weren't hunched anymore. Meanwhile, several teachers still struggled to adjust. Mr. Rowley, a math teacher in his 60s, spoke in hushed tones in the lounge. "I'm not saying he's not smart," he told the others, "but he's the janitor. Come on, that's not normal." Coach Williams cut in. "Maybe not, but have you seen the respect he gets from the kids?" "It's unnatural," muttered Thistle. "One week he's mopping my floor. Now I'm reporting to him." "Then maybe," said Miss S. Rivera, "it's time we ask ourselves why that bothers us so much." At home, Jerome still lived modestly. A small brick house with worn shutters and a garden his wife once tended. Every evening, he'd sit on the porch, watering the rosemary and lavender she planted. He'd sip his tea and stare out at the street, remembering her laugh. The way she used to say, "Jerome, you were born to lead, not just fix pipes." One evening, he found an envelope on his porch. No name, just "thank you" scrawled in childish handwriting. Inside was a drawing, a stick figure of a black man in a suit standing in front of a school, surrounded by smiling kids. At the bottom, "You make me want to be a principal too." He placed it beside the framed article in his office. By the end of the semester, changes were visible. The dropout rate had fallen. Suspensions were cut in half. Students volunteered in the community. Parent involvement rose. Jerome didn't just run the school, he yielded, but not everyone celebrated. At a school board meeting, one member, Mr. Denton, raised his voice. "I think it's dangerous precedent," he said. "A janitor taking over a whole institution. What's next? The lunch lady as superintendent." Gasps filled the room. Brenda Morales, seated beside him, stood. "Jerome Carter has more experience than half the principals in this district. He earned this." Denton scowled. "And yet he hid it. Why pretend to be a janitor?" "He wasn't pretending," she said coldly. "He was surviving. You don't get to judge a man's path when you've never walked it." Meanwhile, back at school, a major incident threatened the peace. A student, Kellen, brought a knife to class. The news spread like wildfire. Police were called. Parents panicked. Cameras circled the building. Jerome didn't hide in his office. He walked straight into the classroom, unarmed. "Kellen," he said softly. "Put it down." The boy trembled, eyes wild, breathing fast. "They all hate me," he whispered. "No one listens. No one sees me. I see you," Jerome said. "And I felt that too, like no one cares. But you're not alone, son." Kellen fell to his knees, sobbing. Jerome wrapped his arms around him and didn't let go. That night, the news anchor opened the segment with, "Principal Carter, once invisible, is now the heart of a school transformed." The next morning, the students formed a line down the hallway. One by one, they handed him thank you notes. Some hugged him, others just whispered, "Thank you, sir." Among them was Blake, the smug senior. "Mr. Carter," he said, awkwardly, "I want to apply to college. Think I can do it?" Jerome smiled. "Blake, you can do anything. Let's sit down together." By graduation, the school looked different, not in bricks or paint, but in spirit. Pride rippled through the students as they marched across the stage. Parents cheered louder than ever. The last speech belonged to Jerome. "Some of you saw me pushing a mop," he began. "Some saw me fixing broken tiles. But today, I want you to see me for what I really am, a man who believes in second chances, in quiet strength, and in you." He paused, scanning the crowd. "I didn't take this job for glory. I took it because no student should be invisible. Because greatness doesn't always wear a suit. Sometimes it wears work boots." The crowd stood. They clapped until their hands were sore. Months later, a plaque was added outside the school entrance, "Jerome Carter Hall, in honor of the man who served, led, and never gave up on us." And every day, students walk past it. Some stop and smile. Others run their fingers over the name, but they all know his story. The janitor who became principal. The man no one saw until he showed them how to truly see. Summer came, and though the school halls emptied of students, Jerome remained. He worked on the building like he always did, tightening stair rails, repainting peeling walls, checking AC vents before the heat set in. But this time, he didn't work alone. A group of students volunteered to help. "You don't have to be here, you know," Jerome told them, smiling as he handed a roller brush to a junior named Tasha. "I know," she grinned. "But you didn't have to be here all those years either. And you stayed." That afternoon, as they painted the gym wall in bright blue, Jerome heard the front doors creak open. He turned, wiping sweat from his brow, and saw a man in a crisp suit approaching, tall, angular face, eyes sharp with familiarity. "Jerome?" the man asked. "Dr. Jerome Carter?" Jerome's jaw clenched slightly. "It's just Jerome now." "No," the man said, smiling. "It's Principal Carter again, isn't it?" He extended a hand. "I'm Dean Powell from Harvard. We went through leadership training together, remember?" Jerome shook his hand, stunned. "You disappeared after your wife passed. Nobody could reach you." "I didn't want to be reached," Jerome replied quietly. "Well," Powell said, glancing around at the transformed gym, the murals, the students laughing together. "Looks like you found something worth staying for." "I found purpose," Jerome answered, "and I found myself again." Before he left, Dean Powell asked, "Would you consider coming to speak at our Educational Leadership Summit next month? Your story, it could change how people think about leadership." Jerome thought for a long moment. If I say yes, I'm not speaking as some polished success story. I'm speaking as a man who's been broken and rebuilt. That's exactly why we need you, Powell said. And so, the following month, Jerome stood once more at a university podium. But this time, he didn't wear a robe or academic medals. He wore a simple gray suit and spoke from his soul. The hall was packed educators, policymakers, journalists. "I used to think titles mattered," he said, "that the words before your name defined you. But what matters is not what you're called. It's what you do when no one's watching. It's whether you sweep a floor or lead a boardroom with the same care and conviction." Someone in the crowd stood. Applause followed. Thunderous. A tear slid down Jerome's cheek, not from pride, but from release. Back at Lincoln High, his influence deepened. He added after-school trades programs for students who didn't want college, opened mental health offices with certified counselors, rebuilt the cafeteria menu to offer real nutrition. And when the state commissioner of education visited that fall, she pulled Jerome aside. "We're creating a new statewide mentorship initiative. We want your model to be the blueprint. Will you help us?" Jerome looked over the courtyard where students were laughing, painting benches, helping each other with homework. "I will," he said, "as long as the focus stays on the kids, not the image, not the politics." Later that year, the school received its first National Excellence Award. Reporters swarmed the front steps. The mayor presented a plaque, but when the cameras turned to him, Jerome said little. "This," he gestured to the students behind him, "is not about me. It's about giving them the space to shine." That night, alone in his office, he took out a letter, his wife's last letter. The ink had faded, but the words still burned in his heart. "Don't stop being who you are, even if the world forgets you. I never will. One day, they'll see what I've always seen, a man who doesn't need a crown to be king." He folded it carefully, placed it in the drawer, and sat back. Outside his window, a freshman boy sat alone on a bench, tears in his eyes. Jerome rose, walked out, and sat beside him. "Rough day?" he asked. The boy nodded. "You want to talk?" The boy shrugged. "I don't know if it matters." Jerome smiled. "Everything you say matters here. This is your school. Your voice counts." The boy wiped his face. Really," Jerome said, "because once upon a time, I thought no one cared what I had to say either. And now, look around." The boy did. "The murals, the clean halls, the kindness. You built all this?" the boy asked. Jerome chuckled. "No, we built it together." From then on, every freshman class at Lincoln High was told the same story during orientation, not about war heroes or celebrity founders, but about Jerome Carter, the janitor who swept floors quietly, humbly, until one day the world looked up and realized they were standing on the shoulders of a giant. And every year, Jerome would stand at that same podium and end with the same words. "You are not defined by what others see. You are defined by what you believe and what you're willing to fight for. So don't just walk these halls. Own them." No one ignored him now. But more importantly, no one ignored each other either. Lincoln High had become more than a school. It was a family. And at the heart of that family, always ready to roll up his sleeves, pick up a wrench or a pen, was Jerome Carter, principal, janitor, mentor, legend. And he never needed a title to prove it. As the years passed, the legend of Jerome Carter only grew deeper within the walls of Lincoln High. His photo now hung in the main hallway, taken during the graduation of the first full class under his leadership. Behind him were hundreds of students, tossing caps in the air. But Jerome wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at them, proud, silent, steady. On a rainy Tuesday morning in October, Jerome stood before the incoming freshman class, just like he did every year. But this time, his steps were slower. His voice, still strong, carried the wisdom of a man who had lived many lives in one. "I see your eyes scanning me," he said with a small smile. "Some of you wonder, what could a janitor turned principal teach you that matters? The answer is simple. I'm not here to teach you formulas or dates in a textbook. I'm here to teach you to believe in yourselves, especially when no one else does." A hand rose in the crowd. A small, shy boy. "Why didn't people believe in you, sir?" Jerome paused. The room held its breath. "Because sometimes the world only sees the surface, the uniform, the color of your skin, the job title. But I'll tell you something my mother told me as a boy, mopping church floors with her. Son, the worth of a man isn't in the badge on his chest. It's in the light in his eyes. When no one's watching." The boy nodded slowly. Later that week, Jerome received a letter, this time from the Department of Education. He was being nominated for the National Educator of the Year award. The letter cited his exceptional transformation of a failing institution, groundbreaking mentorship model, and unwavering commitment to youth from underserved communities. He didn't throw a party. He didn't even tell the staff. Instead, he pinned the letter next to a child's drawing, the one with the words, "You make me want to be a principal too." But as fate often does, just when light seems brightest, shadows return. That winter, Jerome collapsed during a staff meeting. He'd suffered a mild stroke. Paramedics rushed him to the hospital. The news hit the school like a gut punch. Students cried. Teachers gathered in prayer. The silence in the halls that week was louder than any bell. From his hospital bed, Jerome insisted on daily video messages. "Tell the students not to worry," he said, voice raspier than usual. "This is just a detour, not a dead end." By spring, he returned slimmer, slower, but still radiant with determination. "I'm not done," he said during the school-wide assembly, "and I won't be until every single one of you walks out those doors knowing your worth." But he also knew he had to start planning the future. He began training a new vice principal, a sharp, empathetic young woman named Nadine Ellis. She'd once been one of the students at Lincoln High, back when Jerome mopped those same floors. She'd gone on to college, then returned home to teach. "You saw me when I was nobody," she told him. "You made me believe I could lead." "I didn't make you believe," Jerome corrected gently. "I just handed you the mirror." The board approved her as his successor, but Jerome didn't retire right away. He worked beside her, guiding her, coaching her, not with lectures, but with presence. On his final day, a ceremony was held. Hundreds gathered, alumni, students, politicians, news crews. Jerome didn't wear a suit. He wore his old gray custodial uniform under his gown. When asked why, he said, "Because that's how they first saw me. And I'm proud of every day I wore it." He stood at the podium one last time. "I was once overlooked, judged, disregarded. But what people forgot is that seeds grow in silence. So if you ever feel invisible, remember you're just growing." He stepped down. Nadine took the mic, tears in her eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "today we say goodbye to the man who taught us that greatness isn't loud. It's consistent. It's kind. It's Jerome Carter." As she spoke, students began to rise, one by one, row by row, a standing ovation like no other. That night, Jerome walked the empty halls one last time. He ran his fingers over the lockers, peeked into classrooms. He entered the janitor's closet, the one he'd used for 10 years. The mop was still there. He picked it up, chuckled softly, and whispered, "You carried me longer than anyone knew." Then he turned off the light, locked the door, and walked into the twilight, not as the janitor they ignored, but as the principal who had lit a torch in every young soul who passed through Lincoln High. And though he left the building, his spirit never did, because legends don't retire, they echo, and Jerome Carter's echo still dances in those halls. Every morning bell, every student's first step, every dream born from dust. 2 years after his retirement, Jerome Carter received an official invitation from the White House. The envelope bore the presidential seal. The contents, a formal request to accept the Presidential Medal of Education Reform, the highest honor for civilian contributions to education. He stared at the letter for a long time, fingers trembling not from disbelief but humility. That spring, he stood at the national stage, beside Nobel laureates and global innovators. When introduced, the host said, "Mr. Carter did not rise through politics, wealth, or legacy. He rose through perseverance, dignity, and the belief that no child should feel unseen." When he approached the podium, the room fell silent. "I never thought I'd be here," he began, scanning the audience. "Truth is, I was never chasing a stage like this. All I ever wanted was for kids to walk into a school and feel safe, seen, and believed in." He looked down at his notes, then folded them slowly and tucked them in his coat. "I prepare a speech," he said, "but it doesn't feel right, because education is not a speech. It's a heartbeat. And for too long, that heartbeat's been faint in neighborhoods like mine. I didn't fix the system. I just lit a lamp in one hallway. I hope more of you pick up that flame." The ovation shook the room. After the ceremony, Jerome didn't stay for the gala. Instead, he visited a quiet school in Southeast D.C., a struggling public school on the brink of closure. No press, no announcement, just Jerome in his gray jacket, stepping through those halls the way he always did, listening, observing, and encouraging. "Principal Carter," a wide-eyed girl asked, "You're the janitor guy, right?" He chuckled. "I sure am. Can I be like you someday?" He knelt to her eye level. "You can be better than me." He donated the prize money from his award to that school, funding a full-time counselor, new books, and a scholarship named the Quiet Leaders Fund for students who work in silence but shine in substance. Years later, a documentary was made about his life from mop to mission. It featured interviews with students, teachers, and even his former critics. One quote stood out from Blake, the once arrogant senior: "I used to laugh at Mr. Carter. Then I became a teacher because of him. Every time I feel burnt out, I remember him fixing a sink at 6 a.m. before teaching a leadership seminar at 8. Jerome never sought recognition, but it found him, because true greatness doesn't scream, it endures.